world building, or even just trying to figure out how complex real world societies work, it can sometimes feel like trying to grasp smoke at it. You got all these details, politics, trade, culture, and you want to really get them, make them feel alive. But how do you do that without just drowning in information?
Yeah, avoiding the dreaded info dump.
Exactly. And when I started digging into this, I thought, okay, it's going to be about big historical events, political maneuvering, that kind of thing. But what really surprised me, honestly blew me away, was realizing there's this hidden superpower, something really fundamental, everyday stuff you might not even think about.
Okay, I'm hooked. What is it?
It's food.
Food. Okay, interesting.
Yeah. So our mission for this deep dive is basically to explore how something as simple as what people eat, how they eat it, why they eat it, how that can be this really profound way to understand any world, whether it's real or totally imagined. It's like a shortcut, packed with surprising facts.
That makes a lot of sense. Food isn't just, fuel. It's this incredibly rich tapestry. It's woven with all the threads of a society's deepest truths, its values, its history.
Right.
We've pulled these insights from a really fascinating deep dive into the video Food is a World-Building Superpower. And yeah, we're excited to kind of unpack how it all fits together.
Okay, so let's start where pretty much every human story starts eventually.
Yeah.
With a meal. Characters have to eat, right? They always need to eat.
Always. It's a basic need.
And when they do, it's not just about, filling their bellies. They have opinions about it, desires, memories tied to food, whole backstories sometimes. So meal scenes become these incredibly natural places to slip in details, exposition, without it feeling forced at all. It's just people being people.
It's really striking how easily food can show you a world's cultural values. Take Avatar, The Last Airbender. The air nomads, they're nomadic, right? So they typically eat simpler stuff, often raw, gathered foods, apple salad, moon peaches, that weird onion banana juice.
Oh, yeah, that stuff.
Right. It's minimally processed. It directly reflects their lifestyle, their sort of spiritual connection to nature, their mobility. But then you contrast that with the Fire Nation.
Very different vibe.
Totally. Industrialized, powerful. Their cuisine is more processed, often spicier, uses complex cooking techniques, sometimes involving firebending itself, and there's generally more meat. Their food really mirrors their whole expansionist, powerful economy.
And it goes deeper than just the overall lifestyle, doesn't it? It can get really specific, down to things like, say, gender roles.
Precisely. Brandon Sanderson's Stormlight Archives does this really well. Men, the Alfie men, they typically eat these spicy, intense dishes.
Right.
While the women are usually given milder, sweeter curries. And this subtly reinforces the societal expectations. Men are supposed to be the hardy, tough warrior leaders.
And women.
Women are seen as softer, more modest, maybe sweeter in disposition. And, we see echoes of this in our own world. Think about the stereotypes around, say, whiskey being masculine, while salads or baking are often seen as more feminine.
Huh.
Yeah, that's true.
It's a quick visual shorthand for these really deep cultural assumptions.
So food isn't just about what's literally on the plate. It carries this huge social and symbolic weight. Like in A Song of Ice and Fire, the bread and salt.
Oh, yeah.
Classic example.
Offering bread and salt, these two super basic ancient foods, it's not just being polite. It's this profound symbolic promise.
Right.
Safe hospitality.
Absolutely. And it's rooted in real history, those guest rights traditions. It showed absolute trust between a host and guest.
Which makes what happens later so much more impactful.
Exactly. What makes it so powerful in the story is how George R.R. Martin then just shatters that tradition with The Red Wedding. After Walder Frey breaks those sacred guest rights, bread and salt in Westeros literally doesn't mean the same thing anymore. It fundamentally changed the meaning of trust in that world. And that huge shift is shown through violating a simple meal custom. It's brilliant connecting food and society like that.
Wow.
Food even gets woven into language itself. Like there's a Chinese phrase, the rice is already cooked.
Meaning
what's done's done. You can't uncook the rice. It's set.
That's neat. And the symbolic side often crosses over into religion and myth, too, right?
Definitely. Take Lemba's bread from Middle-earth. It's not just magical whey bread.
Right. Keeps you going.
It does, but it's also a cultural and religious staple for the elves. It's described as a gift from the goddess Yavanna, and only a special group, the Yavanildi, are actually allowed to make it. So its creation is like a ritual.
Ah, okay. Didn't know that detail.
Or think about the Iroquois and Cherokee story of the three sisters, corn, beans, and squash.
Oh, yeah, I know that one.
They were turned into staple crop planted together traditionally for happiness and harmony, which, by the way, also happens to be a really effective symbiotic farming method So you get myth and practicality wrapped up together in agriculture.
And then, of course, you have feasts and festivals.
Yeah.
Food is central there, whether it's, I don't know, a Thanksgiving turkey celebrating harvest or some specific dish for a rite of passage. But it's also about what people don't eat, isn't it? Taboos can tell you just as much.
Absolutely. Taboos are incredibly revealing. The Elder Scrolls games have a fascinating one with the Bosmer, the wood elves.
Okay.
They're bound by something called the Green Pact. It forbids them from harming any plant life, period.
Wow. Okay, so vegetarians?
Nope, the opposite. Because they can't eat plants, they are strict carnivores. And it goes further, they consume the dead, even their own kind.
Whoa. Cannibalism.
Ritual cannibalism, yeah. They'll actually fast before a battle specifically so they can consume those who fall. What's a massive taboo for us is, for them, a religiously mandated act. It defines their whole culture.
Okay, that's intense.
It is. But, beyond these really deep cultural values, food also serves as a canvas for just individual identity, self-expression. Think about something like coffee.
Sure. Endless variations.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Every culture has its own coffee rituals. Every person might have their own preferred way to make it. Maybe you love cinnamon spiced coffee around the holidays because it feels festive, or you need that specific dark roast to start your day. It's infinitely variable, reflecting both individual creativity and sometimes shared identity.
So it's not just that food reflects culture. It gives world builders this really subtle way in. You can show complex norms without needing a textbook paragraph. It's like a secret language.
Precisely.
And if food reflects culture and identity, it must also be massively shaped by the physical world, right? Like what actually grows where? What's available?
Oh, absolutely. That's a huge factor. Food inherently showcases a world's ecology, its unique environmental conditions, maybe even its struggles. Well, imagine a fictional map. Maybe you have the Mishkarian Empire, huge grasslands, perfect for wheat. So wheat becomes their staple, maybe even a symbol of the empire's strength. But then up in the mountains, say, the Momo Republic, the soil is rocky and poor. People there would naturally rely more on hardy livestock, maybe goats or yaks, so dairy and meat become central.
Right. And lakeside community.
They'd obviously focus on fishing, their diet, their skills, their whole way of life revolves around the water. It's driven by geography.
And this geographic influence could even shape religion.
Yeah, for sure. Like that wheat-based Mishkarian Empire might worship a wheat weaver goddess, someone who crafts golden fields. But if their religion spreads to, say, a wetter, hotter region where rice is the main crop, maybe the worship adapts. Perhaps instead of weaving wheat, the sacred act becomes planting a single grain of rice. A profound cultural shift, all driven by the environment and what it provides.
That's fascinating. And sometimes this connection between a character, the setting, and the food can hint at deeper mysteries, right? Like that Daenerys theory.
Oh, the lemon tree. Yeah, that's a great example from Song of Ice and Fire fandom. Daenerys has this cherished childhood memory of a lemon tree outside her window in Braavos. It's a symbol of lost innocence for her.
Right.
But the thing is, people point out that lemon trees don't actually grow in the climate of Braavos.
Ah, good.
So it suggests her memories might be false or maybe transplanted from somewhere else, like Dorne, where lemons do grow. It's this tiny detail about food and botany that potentially unlocks a huge question about her past and her identity. It's really clever.
It really is. And it feels like a lot of recent stories are using food not just as background dressing, but as the main way we understand how people survive in strange or harsh environments. It makes the ecology feel real, visceral.
They really are. It's a powerful tool. Look at Delicious in Dungeon. The whole premise is characters having to eat the monsters in the dungeon to survive.
Right, cooking the monsters.
Yeah. They're eating predatory plants that would otherwise eat them, like shadow tails that plant seeds under your skin, or mirror oaks that lure prey. By showing them hunting and preparing these creatures, you learn so much about that world's brutal, unique ecosystem.
Okay, that's a direct approach. What else?
Or think about the Expanse. In the asteroid belt, mushrooms become a key part of the belter diet.
Yeah, the fungi.
Because they're perfect for space, low light, don't need much soil, great at recycling waste. It shows human adaptation in a really harsh, resource-scarce environment. And then you have something like scavenger's reign.
Come see that one.
It's got this incredibly unique, truly alien ecology. And we understand it almost entirely through how the human survivors interact with it, especially through consumption. One character ends up being fed this black goo by a symbiotic creature, which basically brainwashes them, compels them to fetch more food for it. So much of the story is about the characters just trying to figure out their place in this completely alien food chain. It's all about the ecology, shown through eating or being eaten.
Wow, that sounds intense. And it's not just these fantastical settings either. You mentioned many real-world national dishes started out as basically survival food.
Exactly. Things we think of as treats or staples now, like maple syrup or maybe pavlova or even hummus, many originated as ways to preserve calories, get through lean times, survive harsh winters, often calorie-dense, sometimes fermented, like pemmican for indigenous peoples in North America, dried meat, fat, berries designed for sustenance on long journeys or through winter.
So food carries ecology, but if we zoom out, it can also map out history, right? Trade routes, migrations, the impact of things like conquest and colonialism.
Culture's cuisine is like a living history book. It literally holds the story of who interacted with whom, who dominated whom.
That makes perfect sense, history on a plate.
Yeah.
But how does that play out when cultures collide, especially when there's conquest or a dominant power trying to change things?
That's where it gets really complex and often painful. Colonialism, for instance, has left a massive mark on cuisines worldwide. Take Filipino. It's this amazing blend of indigenous flavors, but with heavy Spanish and American influences layered on top. Spam, for example. Yeah. Spam became a hugely popular breakfast food in the Philippines, largely because of the American press, especially around World War II. Canned goods were reliable, widely distributed, so that piece of history is right there in a common breakfast.
Never knew that.
But this kind of cultural mixing isn't always harmonious. It can lead to conflict, stigma. Foods from other cultures often get labeled as barbaric or uncivilized if they don't fit the dominant culture's.
Like how people eat.
Exactly. Think about how using hands versus chopsticks versus forks and knives has historically been judged or stigmatized by outsiders. And then there are the stories of foods that were actively suppressed or lost. These tell really heartbreaking stories. Oppression, war, sometimes even cultural genocide.
How so?
Well, a stark example is from Canada, where historically the government banned or severely restricted the hunting of traditional indigenous eel, elk, and caribou.
Why would they do that?
It was partly a strategy to force assimilation. By making people dependent on a settler diet, flour, lard, sugar, it disrupted their traditional way of life, their connection to the land, their health.
Wow.
So characters and stories grappling with these kinds of histories might react in different ways. Some might desperately try to preserve their culinary traditions, maybe holding on to old family recipes like their sacred texts.
Or maybe they feel the loss.
Exactly. Maybe they never learned those traditions and feel this profound gap in their identity. Or, conversely, they might express outright disgust towards another culture's food, seeing it as primitive or wrong, and that reaction itself embodies deep-seated prejudice.
And when you start talking about who gets what food and how much, you're immediately into class and power, aren't you?
Oh, absolutely. Food is one of the most fundamental ways to understand wealth disparity and social structure. It's unavoidable.
How does that manifest in stories?
Well, Cyberpunk 2077 is a great example. Fresh, real, unprocessed food that's a luxury strictly for the super rich.
And everyone else.
Most people eat kibble. It's this cheap, mass-produced slurry of kelp, plankton, soy proteins. It's bland, low quality. It powerfully shows that the lower classes are basically valued like livestock, just fed the cheapest fuel.
Grim.
Yeah. The very purpose of food shifts dramatically across classes. What's a rare aspirational treat for someone poor might be just Tuesday dinner for someone wealthy.
Like the Capitol in the Hunger Games.
Exactly. That's almost a caricature of it, but effective. You have the Capitol residents gorging themselves at these insane banquets, eating until they're sick, then taking a medic so they can keep eating, just for the experience, the sensory overload.
Right, well, the districts are starving.
Precisely. It's this grotesque display of excess and waste, highlighting the complete apathy towards the brutal system that allows their indulgence while others fight for scraps. Food there isn't about survival, it's about decadence and power.
And the wealthy often use food not just for sustenance, but as performance. Right. Status symbols.
Totally. They turn it into performance art. Think of those super exclusive restaurants like Sublimotion, where dinner costs thousands and involves like virtual reality. It's less about the food itself and more about the spectacle, the exclusivity, signaling your status.
And even just table manners.
Oh, yeah. Elaborate dining etiquette, knowing which fork is for what. That can function as a subtle or not so subtle barrier. It's a skill you have to learn, often within a specific class, and it can be used to exclude outsiders, people from different classes or cultures. It creates instant social tension, that classic, oops, use the wrong fork scene.
Okay, so this is where my head started spinning a bit. We know technology like refrigeration and canning totally changed the game for food, right? Made tropical fruits cheap, lobster less of a luxury.
The big shifts.
So if magic exists in a fantasy world, magic that could preserve food, or maybe even create it out of thin air, why doesn't that just completely blow up the economy and power structures in these worlds? Why isn't magical food this massive game changer in every fantasy setting?
That is such a great question, and I think the video touches on this really well. Here's the if food started granting specific, significant boons, like, say, magical strength or slowing aging or flight or enhanced intelligence.
Okay.
It would immediately stop being just food. It wouldn't be merely about survival or culture or enjoyment anymore. It would become about power, raw, concentrated power.
Ah, I see where you're going.
Nations would instantly classify it as a strategic resource. They'd set up guarded plantations, maybe magical research labs. It would become a matter of national security. And the class divides. They'd become chasms. Imagine the wealthy living for centuries, staying young and strong, while the poor age and die normally.
That sounds dystopian.
It really does. It becomes analogous to how we treat potent drugs or even resources like oil in our world. They get caught up in wars, massive social inequalities, black markets, espionage, the works.
So Dune is basically that idea taken to its extreme. With the spice?
Dune's melange, the spice, is the perfect example. It's the most valuable substance in the known universe. It extends life, grants psychic abilities like seeing the future. Oh, and apparently it tastes like cinnamon.
Handy.
Right. It's used in food, drinks, religious rites, and controlling the spice means controlling the entire galaxy. Its harvesting on Arrakis has all these clear parallels to colonial exploitation of resources.
And scarcity leads to trouble.
Exactly. Its immense value and scarcity inevitably create black markets, smuggling, addiction. Much like, say, prohibition in the U.S. created a massive opportunity for organized crime figures like Al Capone. When something essential or powerful is restricted, people find ways around.
So food can be a weapon, a resource, a status symbol. Can it also be used as like soft power or even be the spark for actual revolution?
Absolutely, on both counts. Soft power, first think about the opening scenes of the original Blade Runner.
Rainy LA streets.
Yeah, and what's Deckard eating? He's eating noodles from a street vendor surrounded by Japanese cultural influence. That wasn't just random set dressing. It subtly reflected the real-world anxieties at the time about Japan's rising economic power. You can show the whole geopolitical balance of a world just by showing what food is dominant, what culture's cuisine is considered mainstream or aspirational.
Huh. Okay. And revolution.
Revolutions are often sparked less by high-minded philosophy and more by empty stomach. That famous line, "Let them eat cake," which Marie Antoinette probably never actually said, by the way.
Right, I heard that.
But it perfectly captures that deadly disconnect between the aristocracy starving pop. Before the French Revolution, you had things like the Flour War and 1775 riots across France triggered by grain shortages and the soaring price of bread. People couldn't afford the most basic. That unrest was a direct precursor to the revolution itself.
Wow. Bread riots leading to revolution.
And food fundamentally impacts warfare, too. Logistics, especially. In Stormlight Archive, you mentioned Sanderson. They have magic, soul casting that can literally create food from stone or air.
Yeah, handy for an army.
Hugely handy. It makes supply lines much less critical than they are in most historical or fantasy settings. But then you flip back to A Song of Ice and Fire during the Siege of Storm's End. Stannis Baratheon is trapped inside, starving.
Right, with Davos smuggling onions.
Before that, the Tyrells, who are besieging him, famously taunt him by having lavish feasts just outside the castle walls, letting the smell waft over. Meanwhile, Stannis and his men are reduced to eating rats and shoe leather. It's this incredibly visceral way to show desperation, the psychological toll of a siege, and the strategic importance of food in warfare, all through what people are or aren't eating.
Okay, let's try and tie all these threads together. You mentioned that Mishkarian Empire and the Momo Republic before.
Right, the wheat versus livestock example.
How could all these elements, culture, history, power, environment, play out in a conflict between them?
Okay, let's imagine it. The Mishkarian Empire, driven by their wheat-based culture and maybe a desire for food security, decides they need the Momo Republic's land. They could clear-cut the Republic's forests, which might be sacred or essential to the Momo way of life, just to plant more of their own imperial wheat.
Destroying their traditional food source.
Exactly. They might even forcibly relocate the Momo people to, say, harsh northern territories where their traditional livestock can't survive and where maybe only the empire's hardy wheat can barely grow. They suppress native farming practices, ban traditional foods.
So the empire's wheat becomes the only option.
It becomes the new norm, imposed survival. But maybe in secret, small pockets of Momo people try to pass down old recipes for cheese or fermented milk, keeping their culture alive through quiet culinary resistance.
Okay, that's culture and oppression. What about power and economy?
Now let's add another layer. Imagine there's a rare addictive fungus up in those northern lands where the Momo were relocated. Let's call it frost moss. It makes you feel warm and peaceful, but it's debilitating in the long run. Wealthy Mishkarian nobles or corporations could take control of the land where it grows naturally. Cartels spring up to process and smuggle it. Maybe the Mishkarian authorities even secretly facilitate smuggling frost moss into the displaced Momo communities to keep them subdued, dependent.
Creating a cycle of addiction and control.
Precisely. The rich profit from the poor's addiction, which is rooted in the destruction of their original foodways and environment. You see how it all connects. Geopolitics, colonialism, economics, addiction, cultural resistance, all woven through the story of who eats what and why and who controls.
Wow. Okay, that paints a really vivid picture. It's actually kind of astonishing when you lay it all out, how food acts as this incredibly powerful, subtle, and just natural way to build and understand complex worlds. Everything from huge geopolitical conflicts down to the most intimate personal memories. Food really is a kind of superpower in storytelling.
It really is. When you start looking at it this way, you realize food isn't just part of the story. It often is the story. It reveals culture, history, power dynamics, the environment itself, and it does it all without needing a clumsy explanation. It just shows you.
So here's something to think about.
Yeah.
Next time you sit down with a story, a book, a game, a movie, or heck, even just look down at your own dinner plate, take a second. Consider what deeper truths about culture, history, maybe even power might be hiding right there in plain sight. You might be surprised what you start to notice.